Talofa Lava and Woman Jeka. My name is Tony K. Fretton, and today I'll be having a discussion and a chat and a talanoa with a very good friend of mine, Miss Catalina. Now, Miss Catalina is the co-founder of Trans Pride March Melbourne, a host of the Bent Spoon Multicultural Cooking Show, which was an award-winning show that won the Globe Community Awards 2002 Media Award, and a host of different things. Miss Catalina is also an MC and a host for a various community events. So we got a lot of great things to have a chat with today. First of all, welcome. Kat, it's really great to have you here.
First of all, you're welcome. Good to be here.
The honor is definitely all mine. And I mean, being a really good friend of you and knowing you for many years, it's great to be in this space and just have a little discussion about different things. Now, one of the main things I wanted to have a chat about, and especially for our community to know a little bit more information about, is around Trans Pride March. Now, this was an event that you helped put together. It was a very important event and an important, I guess, step for our trans community here in Melbourne. Can you tell us a little bit about what Trans Pride March is?
Yeah, so Trans Pride March was really a solidarity march. It came out of, during that time where a lot of trans people of color in America were being, trans people of color all over the world were being murdered left, right, and center. You hear it all the time. I noticed that all other countries in the world were doing, marches to highlight, the trans visibility. And so I thought, that's something that I think we should, come aboard and start doing. And so I got together with Rebecca Loveday and Sasha Sadiq to form the first Trans Pride March for Victoria.
You and a few friends got together to get that started. Now, there were some hiccups, right? Because this is not just an event that was planned a year. It's been a few years, I guess, in production or in preparation. Tell us a little bit about the preparation for it.
I think it's like 3 years because COVID, so we were about to do it. I think 3 times we announced it, we're ready to go. And then because of the lockdown, we had to stop. So, and then we thought we had the Trans Pride concert attached to that at the end of that. And then we just thought, okay, maybe let's not go with the march, we'll go with the concert instead. Because the Trans Pride March it was too big. Where the concert, that was easy, it was already planned, it was all set to go. So we could just roll that out.
Such a well thought out, I guess, event and an important one, and great to have representation, or just to have a space created for people to come out and say, hey, look, I want to come march in solidarity, or I am a trans person that wants to stand up and say, I'm proud, I am here. Now, one of the things I remember in some of the preparation was there was like a few different themes and a few different sort of cultural things within the organization that you'd set up. For example, one of the main things you pushed was the Pastor Mike as a theme. Tell us a little bit about what Pastor Mike is and how important was that for Trans Pride Month?
The Pastor Mike was something that I saw online, and it's such an old term, even from I think as far as back as the 50s and 60s. I've actually seen little pockets of people saying from the Black community in America saying Pastor Mike, and but that came from America, and I saw Angelica Ross and who actually passed the mic to Ashley Preston, and I thought, okay, that's where we need to go. We need to do that. So that's why we decided to ask people that sort of known but not that well known, that deserves to be seen and be heard in our community, because there is this thing in our community that I want to frame it really nicely, where it's the same people that you see all the time, but there's many of us, and you can't really speak on behalf of a community. That's my personal thing. You've got to let people speak for themselves. So that was the whole point of Pastor Mike, is allowing people to speak for themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when for me, I'm a big fan of Pass the Mic, and I think every opportunity to be able to pass the mic. And when we look at how that fits in with Trans Pride March Melbourne, that meant that if you had a spot for a speaker, instead of putting in the obvious speaker, which might be a celebrity figure or someone with a
yeah.
more well-known person, you'd use that opportunity to be like, hold on, let's put another emerging speaker in that spot to
Yeah.
take the spot. Because having understanding that this was going to be a big platform, it's a great way to sort of uplift others and their
Yeah.
profile and that sort of thing. And we hope that continues, you know, and that's definitely why I really appreciated the fact that you passed the mic. Who were some of the people that passed the mic to you?
Oh, so many people. It'd be unfair to just name a few, to be honest, because I don't want to make people get in their feelings. But there are a lot of people have passed the mic to me, and hopefully I've passed the mic back sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, it comes to that point where, especially people of color, when we're in spaces, we don't want to come across as, look, we're going to be tokenistic. Like, you're going to use us to run a community event or use us to run any sort of representation. But it's like, how can I use that opportunity to uplift others or give them an opportunity or let others be seen? Because what we then tend to see is a lot of people always speaking on our behalf, but we're like, hold on, when new things are happening, new ideas are happening, new thoughts are happening, new things, new barriers or new places that we need to really focus on. So I really appreciate that. So thank you. Now, when we look at importance, why was Trans Pride March very important?
I'm just speaking in general, where I know that everybody would agree that we don't often see trans people in media or just in anything. And so it's important that people know that they're valid and that they're important and they matter. That was really the core, that you do see yourself, that you can be something, that you don't have to try and conform into what society thinks that you should be. You can just be yourself in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And I think when we look at Trans Pride March, it was split into two different type of events, right?
Yeah.
We had the Trans Pride March, which is the march and the walk, but then we had the Trans Pride March concert. Now, this ended up being, as I mentioned, two events, but you were able to run the Trans Pride March concert. Tell us a little bit about that part.
Yes, the concert was actually quite amazing. That took like 3 years to plan, because that was going to be the end of the march. And at the very beginning, we had 10 performers, but then by the end we end up having, I think, 6 or 7. But it was the same ones that we had originally. We weren't going to replace anybody, and there were people asking to be part of the concert. And I didn't want to replace the original people that couldn't make it. They didn't leave because they just left because they moved out of state and all that kind of stuff. And so we kept the 7. We were sponsored by Federation Square, which came really handy, and also Transgender Victoria.
And what's happening next?
Well, we're still going to do the march that we later in the year, so that's still going ahead. We're still planning that. And of course, the concert, that's a yearly thing now.
Another exciting thing that happened was you won an award this year. Tell us a little bit about the award and what was the award for?
That was part of the Globe Community Awards here in Victoria. We won for Outstanding Media LGBT. I probably didn't even get in that right order. So that was a really nice honour to get that award on behalf of Thorn Harbour Health.
Yeah, congratulations and well done.
You're so welcome.
Now, I like it. Tell us a little bit about it. It was called The Ben Spoon, is that correct? Tell us a little bit about that show.
The Ben Spoon is a LGBTQI multicultural cooking show, and we have guests coming in from all different multicultural backgrounds, speaking about the recipes that they usually cook at home, and also about their lived experience. So it's a combination of two, because I think they really go well together. Their lived experience, because most of it's, when you're sharing stories, it's always really around food.
Yeah.
So this is a great way of combining the two together, and I'm glad that it's not like a competition kind of thing, like like a normal typical cooking show is.
I'm really grateful that you mentioned that, especially around being able to share around food, because it's so part of many cultures. It's a love language. In some people think of it. I think of it as that. You know,
Yeah.
preparing food, making someone a dinner, making someone food, and to be able to hear when we talk about multicultural different food, there was some there were some dishes in there that I've never seen before in my life. I never knew the meanings of the regions or where some of these foods are created, but then at the same time, their own personal stories were very, very different. What were some of the stories that really stood out for you across the filming? Because it's been about three seasons of filming.
Yeah.
What were some of the important stories that you? I mean, they're all important, but what
Yeah.
are some of the ones that stood out for you?
Let's repeat that. All of them are really
Yes.
important. Well, the ones that really resonated with me, I guess being, Polynesian, Pacifica, is the story with Latoya, where, she had to detransition in order to fit in, moving from Samoa, being a whawhawhingi there, and then moving to New Zealand, where it wasn't acceptable back in the, I'm going to be very nice, back in the 80s. So, yeah, she had to detransition into a man. So her sharing that story was beautiful, and her story with her mother, I can relate to that. And also Nuafe's story where, he was going through some challenges and he was seeking support. It wasn't coming. Maybe it was coming, but it wasn't coming like in the time frame that he wanted. But his father, who he hadn't been in contact for quite a very long time, out of nowhere came and put up his hand and said, "Okay, let me help you."
Yeah.
So sharing those stories were really beautiful.
Everyone might think, I don't have a story to tell, or my story is not important, or what about if I tell my story and people think it's boring? But what actually really happened that I saw through the guest was they didn't realize how actually touching it was and how connecting it was, because once the episode started to be shared, I guess, online in the beginning, the comments came through and the response and the reaction from people, that was also emotional to see. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity for them to be able to tell their story.
I could sit here and tell. I remember all this. I mean, I don't remember like the whole story, but I remember all, like, just like Noafa's story and I remember each person's. There's one part of their story that they shared. I remember all of them.
Miss Catalina, thank you. We've had a chat about some of the exciting things that you've been part of and some important things that you've been part of, which for me, I'm actually really grateful for, to have so many type of leaders, especially like yourself, out there doing the work with community and holding their hand along with it and not saying, I'm going to come and tell you what to do. What are some things that keep you inspired? What are some people or some events or things that have inspired you to do the kind of work that you do now?
Well, most of the stuff that I get inspired by are things that are happening in America, obviously, for obvious reasons. So I'm inspired by so many people, Laverne Cox, Janet Mock. I love that they're out there doing what they love doing, like it, and plus doing activism, because that's kind of like, I've known a lot of people who have kept quiet, have performed here and there, and then later in life, like just recently, they've become an activist. So they see that there's a lot of work to be done.
I have a lot of people that inspire me too, and I can list some of the specific reasons, and when we look at some of the work that you're doing now, a lot of the focus is, number one, at being a trans woman and the trans community. Number two is being a trans woman of color, which is also very important as well. And also, I know you always speak up around our First Nations and Indigenous communities, which is really important, just so that our community can see what does it mean to you to be always all the importance that all of us should have around speaking up for Indigenous and First Nations people.
It goes back to me being brought up raised in New Zealand. My auntie is First Nation. She's Māori, half Samoan. So she taught me how important it is to be connected to her land, and And I learned that in school as well. In school, when in kindergarten, we learned to speak Māori and all that kind of stuff. So that has never left me. And then going into primary school, we're still learning about, indigenous culture in New Zealand, the Māori culture. And so we learnt more of that than my own culture, being Samoan. And when I came here to Australia when I was 16, it was a real culture shock because there was nothing. And so I was like, wow, where is the way? Where can I connect with First Nations people? And it was just, there was no one. I couldn't find anybody. So that's why it's so important. That I think that's why sometimes people mistake me as being First Nations because I'm always, I'm not a representative of the First Nations people, but that's what I've been doing since I was little.
Right.
So nothing's changed, and I think it's important to understand that we are on, Aboriginal land. That's really important. That's like if we were good to go to, if people were to go to Samoa and start their own thing and not even acknowledge the land they're on. So that's, I think it's important for us, as Pacifica people to acknowledge that as well, because often we don't acknowledge.
A lot of multicultural communities can do a lot better. The theme this year for NAIDOC Week was Get Up, Shop, Stand Up. And you were able to also take part in that march as well.
We both did.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to mention it, but we did it together. How was it for you in all the different marches you've been part of? How was this year for you?
Oh, I loved it. As someone, we obviously are allies to the First Nations community. But, I mean, this is probably the third time I've marched. I don't know what happened to the second and first. I go, but I don't know. I don't remember much. I just remember that I had to go, that I needed to go, and it was important to go. But this time round, it was maybe I was in a different time frame, but this time, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I think it was different because I think we just marched, heard the people talk, and then it was finished. This time it was different because, we had to march and stop, and then there was people speaking and performing, march again, same thing, people speaking. It was past the mic. They were getting people, asking people who wants to come and talk. I think that's why it was so powerful this time. And I thought, oh my goodness, I can't wait for the next one to hear what other people, hear other people's stories. So it was so different this time that, I loved it.
No, I'm glad. I enjoyed it too. And I think just to see a lot of different ages of people, which was really great, like a lot of young ones, and it was really intergenerational. And yes, again, the passing the mic was really great because a lot of people get up and there were different type of showing passion, right? Like it was every speaker was very, very different. And I think I think any type of event that involves everyone and or an opportunity for everyone to be involved is really important. One of the things that I found really special, we attended an event recently where they showed a documentary around Vogue House balls by the House of Alexander in Mianjin in Brisbane, which was amazing. But this concept of having a house or having a chosen family is not a new concept now. But one thing I really want to chat to you about, and what I hope you can shed some light on, is something that I really adore about you, and it's about you being like a mother to a lot of younger up and coming trans, gay, like lesbian, like you've got all these children. Tell us about that. What does that mean? What does chosen family mean? What does it mean to be like a mother?
I can really speak of trans, and it really comes down to hormones, because when you're taking hormones, it really takes over your mind, not just physically, really mentally. It changes your thoughts, or your way of thinking, and your way of living, and you kind of go back to being acting or behaving or thinking like a little teenager who needs direction. And so that's where the mother figure comes in. So we all had mother figures, and back then they were called, trans mothers, I don't think they use that term now. I think they're just called mother. And because you had to have someone that can give you direction, because a lot of us weren't at home. We were living with other people. Young people were living with friends. And sometimes those friends aren't really the best role models. And that's where the mother role comes in, where someone will come in and say, okay, this is how you're going to do things. You're going to get a job. You're going to do this and do that. And they teach you everything that your actual birth mother wasn't able to do. So that's why, that's how the mother figure came in for me, was, because of that, because there were a lot of children who were kind of needing direction. And they would always come to me asking me, for help financially, Jesus, and emotionally, mentally. They needed something. They needed someone that they can talk to, that can relate.
We don't see enough of it, of people highlighting the fact that there are like trans women, or just trans people in general, who are looking out for the younger ones, and having that intergenerational connection is really important. I mean, we have so many in our community now, like a lot of older and also younger that we learn from. But to be clear, to make that clear, it's not that their biological mother cannot teach them different things or to guide them in that way, but it's more of there are nuances and things in transitioning, right, that might be a little bit different, that might be hard. What were some of the challenges that you might have had that you learned from your trans mother at that time?
She actually taught me to walk like a girl. It's those little things.
Yeah, right.
Obviously not everybody wants to be a girl. People, are not always wanting to conform. But for me, it was that. It's just the little things. She actually taught me how to put makeup on. That was like 20 years ago. And that same way of how she taught me how to apply makeup on, I still do today. It's very old school. It's just little things.
You recently posted on social media, it was like a reference letter from like a community center that you started doing some of your community work. So can you tell us about that part? Because that was really cute.
Yeah. I think I was 20 or 19. So 18, 19, I volunteered for Black Town Youth Services for a few years. And I came in. Well, actually, I came in what they will call now as non-binary, because I didn't come in presenting as male or female. I just came as me, but the world saw me as either a girl. Then they thought, no, you must be boy. They were confused. I wasn't confused. I just came as me. And so, I was volunteering there. And then when I was starting to look for work, while I was still volunteering there, I had to get a reference letter, and I asked the one of the managers there if she could write me a reference letter for work, and she wrote it she actually asked me, okay, so if I write you this reference letter, and she looked at me and she goes, but are you going to be a girl in the future? And I said, yeah, I am. Okay, so at that time I didn't even know what she meant by that. I thought that she was just going to write me a letter because I said yes, but I didn't realize that she was actually putting in the letter the pronouns, and she changed it to she. But then halfway through the letter, she's forgotten but he. But yes, of course, she meant well. Yeah, that's where that reference letter came from. And I used that letter, and I obviously still have it. And that got me jobs.
Sometimes it's the really small things that you can do for someone that means the most, do you know? And and I love that. And I think it's an encouragement for everyone. It's nice to just be a human being, you know, like you just being kind to someone also meant a lot. And which is really great. Now, now let's talk a little bit about Pacifica, the term Fafafine. Now, this one, how did you find yourself connected to that term, or what was your learning around that term, and what did that mean for you?
The term fafafinge, I mean, obviously being, quite young. I mean, I've always known because I was raised as a fafafinge, doing the chores at home. I didn't have to do any of the chores outside the house. My brothers had to mow the lawn and do all the manly stuff. I didn't have to, and I actually didn't know why. I thought, like, I was in my head, I was thinking, why can't I do the stuff that my brother's doing? Why do I have to go and wash the dishes and vacuum the floor? I think I just wanted to be with my siblings because it was just me in the house. Because it was at that time it was just all the boys, and then my two older sisters were either at work or in another town, and so they treated me as the girl, and so I had to stay inside and do all the cleaning and all that kind of stuff. But that term we were thinking that it meant that it was trans woman or whatever, but it doesn't. It's a broader term. It's I wouldn't say touchy because that term people are used to saying fafafinge means that it's everyone isn't it. Gay men are included in that, but then there's a lot of gay men who don't want to be included because it means manners of a woman or like a woman.
As a diaspora community, especially a diaspora LGBTQIA plus community, some of our languages don't have the language to translate some of these Western terms that have sort of been created. So when we look at terms like, for us, I guess, when we look at the term fafafine, which historically within the existence of the word has meant in a manner of a woman or mannerisms of a woman, which there's also the other term as well, which is fa'atama or fa'atama, again, in a manner of a man. But I guess when we try to translate our terms from the Pacific to Westernize words, it's almost we're more closely to non-binary than we are closer to strict gender roles or gender binary terms as in the Western world. So it's a little bit, I guess that's definitely explains why it can be a little bit tricky and it become a debate.
For me, I believe that non-binary people were first because
absolutely.
there was no hormones that day. Non-binary people, I think they've been here, they've always been here, and we've just evolved from that.
Historically, I mean, I've seen images of what a fa'afafine looks like, and it does not mean they look female presenting. They could just wrap their ilava differently, but that's it. But we're from small islands. We don't have access to makeup. Even cis women don't have access to makeup or the normal things that we don't have salons and things like that, or all the products to do grooming. To the level that we do it in Western cultures, in Western world.
But we don't actually care either.
Yeah.
It's not in our thing to care about looking feminine. It's just whenever we feel like it.
Yeah.
Because our culture really tolerate. I like to say they are, somewhat accepting. But obviously some people don't like saying, accepting is probably not the right term, but somewhat accepting.
As a gay Samoan, in Samoa, people just call me fa'afafine, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because I've never looked at it from a term of that is an offensive word. Because the people in my life, I look up to fa'afafine people. Like, I think they're the most amazing people in the world. So if anyone turned around and said, "Oh, you're fa'afafine," I'm like, "Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the compliment." And I've always looked at it from a position of strength. I grew up in Australia, and I lived in Samoa for 10 years. And it was a culture shock that I think a lot of people should know, that fa'afafine were part of everyday life. Like, they're driving the bus, they're in the bank, they are your teachers, they are your preschool teachers. It's not like over here where they're still fighting for those rights to be employed in those type of employment. So my encouragement would be for anyone to really have a look at some of these Pacific Islands and see how they live daily life, which is different to law. And they're saying, they've got different laws in place for homosexuality, and then and all the different human rights laws that they're fighting, which it's different when you are looking at it from a legal point of view, and different from when you're actually there seeing it culturally and how it's actually played out. So religion has a big part of that. I mean, were you a religious person growing up at all?
My family was.
How did you navigate through religion?
I didn't have an issue with it, until one day my brother told me that, God said he doesn't love you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, all right then. Well, guess why we go to church tomorrow? I wouldn't say it was really the church. I would say it was the person that told my brother that. Because I still have respect for, the church, the religion that my family belongs to. Although there's a lot of things I disagree with, but then you can find that in every religion or any group. But it doesn't make them bad people. It's depending on the individual person that's teaching. I just remember going into, classes, and the teacher is just, making up stuff. It's their interpretation of what they think it is saying in the Bible. No one is consistent. I don't really have an issue with religion.
A lot of our Pacific Island cultures, religion is a big thing. I mean, every single village has a church. I mean, even our diaspora community, going to church is a thing. And I think we do church better than the people that introduce church to us. Like, we do it really well. We do church really, really well. But at the same time, it has its positives and negatives.
Well, we had our own gods before religion came into.
Absolutely. It's about decolonizing. Like, who are we as people before colonization? And I think that's really interesting, because when we look at that, gender roles and sexuality roles, that was something introduced to the Pacific Islands. That sort of thing of us growing up together and our roles in terms of what a man's meant to do, what a woman's meant to do, what a non-binary meant to do, that it was very, very shared. And we had that village mentality, not an individualistic one.
Yeah.
But there were some things that really, really minor. But when you look at we're very privileged in the Pacific Islands, because as Samoan people, we've kept really strong in our culture, whereas others have completely lost their culture, or lost their language, lost so much of who they are as people because of colonization. But we're a bit more privileged in that, being Samoan. So
we come from ancestors of fighters and warriors. We've got the Mau movement. I feel like that's in our DNA. It's definitely in my DNA.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got any relations part of the Mau movement, but I feel like that, I drive from that through my activism. Even before I started being an activist, I read so much about the Mau movement. And that time when I was reading that, I wasn't thinking of what I've done so far in the past, 10 years. When I read it in school, because I studied Samoan studies at school, I just thought I had to learn, because I didn't really learn much about Samoan history, through family. And I wanted to learn more, about Samoa.
So just to how about our people watching, the Mau movement, which is MAU, was a movement started by a few of our Samoan chiefs and leaders who helped turn Samoa, or gave Samoan independence through their colonized the countries who took Samoa into administration. So the Mau movement was the movement of us moving from administration by another country into being an independent state or an independent country. And with you, I find a lot of resonance in that as well. And I think we should all I think if we could all stand up for each other, like if you see someone struggling, or if you see anyone that's not doing well, it's like, how can I be of service to them? How can I help that other person? And I think there is so much of that you do already, and you do so well, that I can definitely see the Mau movement in you. It's in your blood.
Thank you. I'll tell you this little story, right? Because I was adopted out to my dad's brother, but I still was living with my birth father as well. So I was back and forth. So my mother and my dad had my adopted mother. I don't like saying that, but and my birth father were having a fight over the Mau movement photo, because my dad was one of the few people that had the Mau movement photo brought into. Had a copy of it in New Zealand, and he had it when he came to. He brought it with him when he moved to Samoa, And so it was a rare thing to have. But I grew up hearing people about this photo of group of people, and I just remember the word Mao. And I remember my parents, both my parents, they were full on like arguing, and I just thought, I read this painting, this picture, because I had no idea who that picture was, and I thought, you know, the leader of the Mao movement in the middle, I thought he was my grandfather. I thought that's probably why they're fighting, because it's, you know, my grandfather. So I had that memory stuck with me for so many years, and I really thought it was my grandfather in that photo. And I learnt, you know, in my 20s, actually not long ago, okay, so it wasn't my grandfather.
Well, it could be your grand uncle, it could be your grandfather's cousin. Who knows? You know, we're all related. Miss Catalina, I'm excited for the many things upcoming for you, and thank you for spending your time with us today. But yeah, thank you everyone for catching up with us today with Miss Catalina. It's been a pleasure having you sharing with us and chatting with us, and yeah, we're really excited for everything happening for you upcoming, and for anyone that wants more information about some of the things that Miss Catalina is up to and what she's doing, you can find her on Instagram. But yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.